Hey guys, LioConvoy here. After doing a poll on Twitter, it seems like my viewers would like a bit of variety in my content by the way of reviewing swords. Now, this won't be supplanting other content here, so don't worry. I aim to do one sword review a month just to keep the content going. Before all that though, I feel I need to give some background here. As those of you who have seen a couple of my other videos regarding weapons, I've always had an interest in swords, ever since I was a child. Literally. That's me in that photo, crossing those pieces of wood like they were swords. They've also been prevalent in the fiction I consumed as a kid, even into my adult years. Thundercats? Check. He-Man? Check. TMNT? Check. How about Transformers? Yep, even there. And we can't forget about Voltron, of course. But let's talk about my first exposure to Japanese swords. That one's actually simple. It was technically Hachiman from Thundercats. Stern, unyielding, and the only heroic character Mum-Ra was actually afraid of.
You know me, bad man. I am Hachiman.
Hachiman and his sword, the Thunder Cutter, was rooted into my mind at a young age, not just because of his striking look, but also because of his unapologetic sense of honor.
This cannot be. How can I fight a man I respect, whose little sister has just saved my life?
You have already tested each other's bravery. Isn't that enough?
Honor demands that I obey my lord Mum-Ra.
That's not honor. That's rigid, futile, and stupid.
It is my belief, my code, and just because you do not understand it, that does not mean it is wrong.
Cut to my late teens, early 20s, and my studies go into research on the topic via Sensei Daryl Max Craig's books Iai, The Art of Drawing the Sword, and Mugairyu. I would also study later at his dojo in the early 2010s. But more information on stuff like that in a bit. Having turned 18 and loving swords, I did what any person with that interest and money did. Bought cheap stainless steel junk, and that's something of interest in the sword market at the time. In Sensei Craig's EI book, he talks about how seemingly out of nowhere people were buying cheap wall hanger swords at an absurd price. A set of 3 stainless steel katanas would cost around $130. What started this though? Well, a few things. I was actually able to track the growth of interest in Japanese weapons back to the ninja craze of the 80s. Unfortunately, I have very little knowledge of that genre, so I asked my friend Michael from RetroBlasting to talk a bit about the background of these films as he's well versed in them. He also talks to me a little bit about how they led into the weapon market at the time.
Where do I begin talking about the ninjato from the 80s? Because its history and its origins are somewhat interesting. If we use Enter the Ninja from canon films as the beginning of the ninja fad or the ninja kickoff, you'll notice in that movie that this traditional 80s ninjato or ninjato, which is also known as the Kosugi ninjato, is not in that film. It doesn't make an appearance until Revenge of the Ninja in 1984. Is that right? I believe that's 1984 when Revenge of the Ninja comes out. That could be 83 though. Point is that this configuration of blade with the very long handle and the square tsuba, it's not. It doesn't make an appearance in that original film, and so the tall tale, which I guess really isn't a tall tale, the mystery of it is, where is the true origin or genesis of this? And it seems like all evidence points to that it was something that Kosugi had a hand in designing when he was working on doing the next film, Revenge of the Ninja, which then it became his mainstay weapon in all of the ninja films he was in, even after he left canon films. And he licensed replicas of this sword to be sold in martial arts magazines all over the United States and probably in other countries as well. But it was a sword that you could order. It's called the Kosugi Ninjato, and you could order it out of ninja catalogs and martial arts catalogs. That being said, it is not and even though pop culture picked it up in other mediums, in the G.I. Joe comic book and things like that, the characters were drawn often with a sword that looked like this. So it had an influence. It had an impact. The question becomes, given that it's not a real blade, and in Enter the Ninja they use actual katanas, not this ninjato construct. What is its influence? And it was in kids' toys. It was pretty much what Leonardo carries in Ninja Turtles. It's a straight-bladed, square Tsubad katana. And his had longer blades by the time you get to the cartoon. In the original comic book, his blades were actually shorter and in some cases were almost katana-like in a curvature. But they were generally straight blades, maybe with a little bit of a flare. Point I'm trying to make is that these ninja swords and replicas were everywhere. Now, as a kid, I always ended up with a toy katana. Now, I don't know why that is, because just luck of the draw. A lot of times, the ninja swords that were configured, the plastic ones that were configured like the Kasugi Ninja Toe, they were almost for smaller kids. And I know that sounds weird, but when I would go into the Halloween store or the toy store and pick out a ninja sword, the ones that were big enough for me or didn't look terribly chintzy were always the katana styled toy swords. The ninja toes were much smaller, and they always seemed to be for much younger kids in their scale and size. So that just might have been, where I was growing up, but that was the case because I was a ninja like 3 times for Halloween over 3 non-consecutive years, and I always ended up carrying a katana toy rather than a ninja toe toy. So the justice of this, the pop culture justice, is that now not only are original Kasugi ninja toes from the 80s coveted by martial arts pop culture fans, but people are wanting to replicate in a more superior swordsman-like fashion, true smithing fashion, the ninjato. And so this particular replica that Melinda acquired for me, it is not a stainless steel Kasugi replica from the 80s or Kasugi one from the 80s. This is a recreation of the Revenge of the Ninjato, the Kasugi configuration, but done in actual carbon steel, done in actual, T10 or whatever you want to call it, with, real artisan craftsmanship put into it by a dedicated fan. So I'm proud to have this in my collection. I know it's not a real sword, like I get that in history, but for my personal history, my growing up, it is the ninja sword, and I'm really proud. Sorry to stutter, but I'm really proud to have this in my personal collection with my other bits of pop culture memorabilia. So I hope that answers your question. It is kind of a weird footnote in sword history and toy sword history, but there you have it.
From fictional to a functional weapon that can actually cut, and it wound up prevailing in other forms of fiction. That's pretty interesting. But here's one other contributor to this: anime. Between the 80s and the early 2000s, there was an underground interest in anime that boomed in the mainstream via network programming like Toonami, leading to a bunch of younger people to be interested in swords via their exposure to anime like Rurouni Kenshin. This not only had weebs buying junk at inflated prices for not knowing better, but led them to dojos in hopes that they could learn how to use the weapons. However, weebs aren't exactly known for martial prowess for a reason. It takes work and discipline, so they never stuck around. This is why I suspected my sensei didn't care enough to learn a student's name unless they'd been there for years and showed commitment. He one time wrote his experiences dealing with others that came to him and said how cool it was that he knew all the stuff that he did and that they'd give their lives to learn it. His only response to that being, then do so. It's what I did. Sensei didn't play any games. This man dedicated his life at an early age to learn Budo, Japanese arts for war, to the point to where he's a Hatamoto of the Chiba clan, having their family's form of Hokushin Itoryu passed to him. But how does that fit into my life, though? Well, in 2005, I found myself wandering into a knife shop in the Orange Park Mall in Florida and seeing the Paul Chen practical katana for sale. And as you've all seen here, I prefer something real. So I got it, and 15 years later, I still have it. I studied at Sensei Craig's dojo for a while, and I wound up ultimately going into HEMA after that. But we're going to go ahead now and talk about the sword. So let's talk about it, beginning with its specifications. Its HRC, or Rockwell Hardness rating, is 60/40, meaning it is one tough sucker. It's 39.5 inches from pommel, or kashira, to tip, or kisaki. It weighs about 2 pounds, 5.7 ounces. And the blade from habaki to kisaki is 27 1/4 inches of cutty ouchness. It is made from 1566 high carbon steel and is differentially tempered, which means it's pretty tough and it isn't too easy to bend. Now let's get a closer look at the sword itself and its components. Before going any further, I need to state some things. As I said earlier, I've had this sword for 15 years, and in that time it's taken some heavy damage. It's been bent and reset, its polish has gone down, and the saya or scabbard isn't the original one. I'm letting you know all of this so you're aware this isn't a good representation of what a new one looks and cuts like. Going into the details though. The kashira is very plain, which is fine as this is on the low end of an economical cutter. The shitodome though had issues of being way too sharp when I first bought it, and it dug into my hand. This has been corrected on newer examples though. The suka, or handle, feels wonderful in the hand. I've heard some people describe the sword as having an axe handle, but it feels perfect to me. The suka ito, or handle wrapping, is still tight and good even after 15 years, and the suede they used for it feels very comfortable in the hand. The manuki fittings are flowers and give the sword a more elegant look. The same, or ray skin, under the suka ito is real and is still in good shape. The maguki pins that hold the sword together are still in place, and they will always be so, as the suka is epoxied to the tang from the forge itself. Moving up, we have the fuchi at the top of the suka, which is just as plain as the kashira, but again, that's fine. The seppa, or brass pieces on each side of the suba or guard, are still holding, and the suba shows no sign of wiggle even after all the abuse. The patina that was originally on these steel parts for the sword furniture were originally black, but they've clearly worn off after all the years of use. Moving even further up, we get to the habaki, or blade collar. This item's purpose is to seat the sword in the saya without moving. It's still in good shape with no wiggle. Let's get into the blade now. The ha, or edge, still feels pretty sharp despite the years, and the mune, or back of the blade, has some damage but still does its job. There is no bohai, or filler, in this sword, but I like the reflective mune more. The kisaki has worn down a bit over the years, but the hamon is still visible and pretty. The sori, or deepest part of the sword's curve in the blade, is 3/4 of an inch. At this point, I'd go over the saya or scabbard, but I no longer have the original saya this sword came with. I did iaijitsu so much with it that it actually cracked the original saya from koiguchi, or saya mouth, all the way to the middle of the saya across its width. In fact, that's why this sword has a spot on the blade. I tried fixing the saya using wood putty and wood glue, with the sword still seated in it, like a dummy. But be aware that the saya this comes with has a loose sageo, unlike the tied one here, and it lacks the shitodome on the kurigata that this one has. But that's enough of the technical stuff. Let's get to cutting. Goes without saying, but I'll repeat it again. These are weapons. Treat them with respect. They are not toys. I begin the cut test. And frankly, not really all that impressed with what I'm seeing. Granted, it's a 15-year-old sword, but I expected it to clear the targets better than this. Now, I might just be rusty, but later on I find out I don't think that's so much of the case here. Now, you're going to see that it's cutting a little bit, but not much. And right here, nod to my friend Michael, just cutting through a Funko Pop, because those things are terrible. Now, on the next cut, you're going to see here with the next Atami, Mike Edelson, who did The Art of Cutting with the Medieval Sword, a book I highly recommended, told me what he wants to see in a sword review is cutting through linen, so old cotton kekogi is not even being dented by this sword. So I get frustrated, get tired of not being able to get anywhere, so I pull out a newer sword and go ahead and try it like that. Went right through into the tatami and cut pretty deeply there. And at this point, I'm just going to enjoy myself, having fun, being able to actually cut things and do a decent job of it. Especially like the fact that I got to pull off a draw cut here. Very nice. I enjoyed that. Unfortunately, the older sword didn't perform very well, but, you know, it's old. It's been through a lot. So I guess it's okay. Now, let me go through a couple things here. My litmus test for swords is this. Does it work? And can I defend myself with it and my family? Would I put my life on the line with it? If this was in good condition back when I first got it, I absolutely would be able to say yes. But as it is now, I'm afraid I can't say that. It's too dull, won't cut through cloth properly, and had a very, very tough time with the tatami mat. Now I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions that were sent in to me. Yeen Scream at LennyFace on Twitter asks, why does everyone see the katana as godly weapons and European swords as cumbersome and inferior? Primarily, Lenny, that comes down to the media representation. Unfortunately, European swords have gotten a very bad reputation in terms of our media due to ignorance on how they properly function and work. When you measure them out correctly, they tend to perform pretty well no matter what you are using, because swords are weapons used to kill an opponent. And if it does not work to kill an opponent, it's probably not a good sword. Up next, we have Firepaw here at Alicorn of Nature on Twitter. I'm sure these questions have been asked before, but how much is one? How can you tell the quality of the practical katana versus other katana or other swords? I've seen it debated before, but which sword model brand would be better for actual fights versus one for decor? If you're looking for a sword for decor, you're generally going to want to go for 440 stainless steel because it's cheap, looks decent enough, and nobody's going to really care. Now, as far as being able to tell which sword works best, you're going to have to handle them. And unfortunately, there's not very many sword shops around, so pick and choose your places. But more importantly, when it comes down to it, price can sometimes tell you a lot. It's not everything, but if you buy a sword for $50, it's probably not going to be the best thing in the world. Now, as far as where I get them, I highly recommend Cult of Athena. They have the best prices I have ever seen for swords. As far as how much it goes for right now, on Cult of Athena, you can buy this sword in brand new condition for $178.46. If I were to spend $200 on a sword, it probably would be for a brand new Hanwei Practical Katana or Paul Chen Practical Katana. Cult of Athena generally has the best prices online everywhere. So I really recommend them. They're going to have their review section up again. If you're looking for good sword reviews, I highly recommend also Matthew Jensen. And for technique and other things, I recommend Scala Gladiatoria. You can also check out Scalagrim, but he's kind of hit or miss for me, just on my own personal preference. He needs to wrestle more. But I have one other question here, and that is from Mint Heart at Emmy Doodles Art. How use long stabby? The answer, very carefully. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I would like to give a special thanks to my patrons, Avis, Hateful Tate, Harry Partridge, Riddle of Lightning, Norden, and Busy Robot Hands. If you'd like to support my nonsense, feel free to check it out in the description and find my Patreon there, or follow me on social media. I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you'd like to see more like this, go ahead and comment below. Tell me what you think, what I did right, what I did wrong, what you want to see, what you don't want to see. Take it easy. Take care.